Hey guys, so I just wanted to take a minute to address the topic of sharing and taking turns in preschool. This is an item that we are looking at in this week's module, and it was on the chapter review questions. And the majority of people actually typically answer this question incorrectly. So I always want to take a few minutes to just cover this topic and talk about the importance of understanding actually what's counterintuitive about sharing, and give you just a little bit of background about that kind of briefly. So, if you research the Montessori method or a Montessori classroom, one of their core principles is actually that they do not, in fact, do sharing in the preschool classroom. And there's a variety of reasons for that, and there's a lot of research to support this idea. So, if you're feeling like this lady's crazy, there's no way this is right, kids need to learn how to share, right? I would encourage you to really look it up and look at some of the research behind what I'm going to tell you. Um, when we force children to share something, there are a couple of different things that happen. For starters, you guys all know that in Erickson's theory, we have the stage of autonomy versus shame and doubt, and followed by the stage of initiative versus guilt. When a child is using something or playing with something and they've taken initiative to choose that item and gotten engaged in whatever they're doing and are kind of exploring the use of it, and we force them to stop that process and give it to someone else, it in fact actually inhibits their learning. So not only have we broken their concentration and forced them to give it to someone else, but we've most likely upset them emotionally. And in fact, forcing a child to share or give someone else a turn with something typically increases behavior problems. And you all know that a main strategy in a preschool classroom is to avoid behavior problems and to try to take strategies that will be meaningful in preventing behaviors from occurring. So, by forcing children to share with one another or making them take turns with items, or putting a time limit on something, even, it actually inhibits all of those social emotional processes and strategies that are at work or at play in their learning. This is not to say that there's never a time when we should teach sharing. That's incorrect. There absolutely are times when sharing is beneficial. Sharing should be taught. Having a guest over to your home and having a friend come to play and want to use your toys is a great opportunity to share, and a great example of a time when we would want to talk about sharing and why it's important, right? That you welcome someone and you give them an opportunity. But at school, everything in the classroom is everyone's, and we all share it. And so children simply know, if you have employed this philosophy, that if someone else is using an item, it's just not available. It's not a choice. And when they know that, and when that underlying philosophy is laid and is there, they don't really ask. They'll occasionally ask, or they may say, I really want to use that. But if they know that that's the boundary and that's the expectation, they're not going to ask, because they know the answer is no, right? We're not going to force someone else to give something to you. The other thing that's important about understanding this is it actually doesn't in fact teach a very useful or important social skill. As an older child or an adult, we know that if we want something, it doesn't always mean we get it, right? It doesn't mean that I can force someone to share with me, or that I can get an item that I want just because I say I want it. That's not really accurate, nor does it really ever happen as an adult. And so, on the contrary, as an older child and an adult, we do have to wait. And we do sometimes have experiences where we can't get things that we want. And so a more meaningful opportunity is to teach children that, to teach them that social skill and teach them that they have to wait. They can't always get what they want. They have to be patient. There's an appropriate way to respond if someone else has something that you want. You could ask them. That's always an opportunity I give children. Ask them if you can have a turn. Maybe they're ready to give it up to you, or maybe they're ready to let you have a turn, or let them know when you're finished with that, could you bring it to me, or could you let me know because I really want to use it. And so of course there are opportunities when children can share and will choose to share, but we don't ever want to force it. We don't want to force the issue or force the topic, because really it's actually counterintuitive to what we're trying to teach. We want to teach them kindness and compassion, waiting, patience, how to behave appropriately. What we don't want to do in our classrooms is create a meltdown. And typically, if I have forced a child to share with someone else, it's usually going to create that meltdown. So then I'm inhibiting emotional development, and there's just a lot of reasons. So if you have more questions about this, look up the research and kind of engage in some of that thought or conversation around it. And try it out sometime. Try it out and see what happens. Um, Interestingly, in Montessori classrooms, there are often not any sharing problems because they have those boundaries laid, and because they know they will use something until their heart's content, and they will be finished with it, and then they'll move on. And rarely is there a case where a child is going to use the same item for 45 minutes and refuse to let anyone else have a turn. When you remove the potential or the possibility of having to give it to someone else and not having your fill of an item, they just don't fear that anymore, and so it doesn't even really come up. If I know that I might not get a long enough turn, or how much of a turn I want with something, and I might be forced to share at any given time with another child, that in fact causes them to increasingly want to grasp that item and not give it up. So it almost works against us when we force sharing. So think about that, keep it in mind, and try it sometime when you're working with kiddos and see what happens.